This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Rapido Trains.
Buying Rapido trains will make you happy.
Haven't you heard? Rapido Trains has announced a U-boat load of General Electric U-Series locomotives, U-25Bs, U-30CGs, U-33Cs, and U-36Cs, and the U-34CH. You can check out all of these new releases and much more on their website, rapidotrains.com. Did the snow keep you from getting to the Railroad Hobby Show? No worries. Spring Creek Model Trains has you covered. Right now, ATLP listeners can take 5% off in-stock, regularly priced Rapido Trains products on their website through May 31st. Use code ATLPSPRING26 at checkout at springcreekmodeltrains.com. Serious about your model trains? Protect and organize your prize collection with modeltrainbox.com. Premium CNC cut foam storage boxes and transport cases for both HO and N scales, designed by modelers for modelers, with free U.S. shipping on every order. Durable, stackable, and built to last. Visit modeltrainbox.com and give your fleet the home it deserves. ATLP Extra is our monthly newsletter delivered right to your inbox each month. Sign up for free at atlpextra.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott, so glad you could join us. It's time for Talking Ops with Don Irace, and joining me from the Sunshine State, Don Irace. Don, good to see you.
Good evening, Ray. Good evening, everybody. Glad to be back. It's a little cold, but we'll deal with it.
It's a little cold in Florida. So what do you do when it gets cold in Florida? You're not used to that.
No, this is all the years I've been on there, almost 7 years now, and this is the first time the heat's been on for a whole week straight.
You got heat in that train shed?
I got heat. Yeah, I got a mini split that does heating and cooling, but it hasn't seen the cooling cycle in a week and a half.
Well, I know what you have been doing. You've been doing some recent projects you've been sharing with us, including a lot of that. What's it? Tamaya Blue has been spraying around. What have you been up to?
Yeah, so I've been wanting to do a car for the Riverbelt line to represent his railroad on my layout, and so I dug through my box and I found a grain hopper, and I stripped it all down. I had Paul send me the correct color, so I bought the blue, and I primed it, painted it, and then I decaled it all up and weathered it. And the only thing I haven't done is the safety bars. I haven't put the safety bars on, but we actually moved the car last night from CSX yard into Worcester. So it took its first trip. I did a video. It was a little bit longer of a video than I posted, because when I was almost done, one of the operators decided to sneeze, and the other guy behind me says, "Bless you." I'm like, so I had to edit all that out. So that's why it ended up a little short. But yeah, so this car is going to be making its way to Australia. We're going to actually interchange this car between me and Paul, and I'm going to ship it on to you, Ray, and you're going to be kind enough to be the interchange partner and bring it to Australia. He's going to run it on his layout, and whatever else you run it on down there, then he'll load it up, give it back to you. You'll bring it back up here to me, and I'll get it back on my layout again. Then we'll get it over to John's, and maybe I'll have you bring it over to Mark's house before you send it back to me, and he can run it on his layout too. Put some miles on his car.
Yeah, kind of authenticate the car and kind of bring some realism to that. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to get over Paul Cassar's Riverbelt line and see that as we travel. And speaking of traveling, I know we both have done some traveling when going to operate layouts, and whether it be in Syracuse, New York, or Boyd, Texas, and everywhere else in between, coast to coast, wherever we can get a chance to go run a layout. It's a lot of fun. And a lot of times these operating sessions are tied to an event. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, which is operating layouts around these events and what it's like to be a layout owner doing that. And joining us is a very familiar name to both of us. That'd be Mark Herrick of the BNSF Montana Division. Mark, good to see you.
Nice to see you guys. I'm glad I'm here. Yeah, I had a busy weekend for Amherst weekend.
Yeah, for sure. I can't wait to dive into that. And Don and I got a bunch of questions as what it's like and that whole idea of having out-of-towners come and operate a layout and then doing it multiple times over in a weekend. But before we get there, for those that don't know the BNSF Montana Division and haven't caught the past episodes, which we will share in our show notes around the layout.com/214, why don't you give us just a little bit of a summary of the BNSF Montana Division?
Okay. The BNSF Montana Division runs from the western end of the layout, which is Spokane, Washington, and it runs east to Shelby, Montana. It's basically a through route, a lot of intermodal and grain trains, crude oil trains, that type of traffic through trains, and then switching jobs. So we have 6 switching jobs that come out of out of Spokane Yard, and then we have 2 jobs that come out of Whitefish Yard, local trains. So it definitely keeps some people busy. The layout's a 2-deck layout and a 20 by 26 foot room, and we have a good time. Usually, typically 6 operators. Sometimes we get a few more, and that's sort of what happened over the weekend.
Yeah. So how often do you actually do this event tied up to this train show?
Every year that they've had Amherst for the past 3 years, guys from out of town that I've met on other operating sessions, like Ray referred to in Texas or out west, or they've come to Amherst, of course, the largest hobby show basically in the United States. And they've always asked me if I would open up for operating sessions. So typically the operating sessions, I try to avoid the complete weekend because people, of course, come to go to the show. So I typically start on a Thursday evening and then a Friday daytime session. I skip Saturday so I can actually attend the show and then try to do something for people going home on Sunday. That the crew size varies depending on how many people want to come by.
Yeah, so you had quite a few this time. You actually, did you have a remote dispatcher for this too?
Yeah, of course. I have a remote dispatcher regularly in Sebastian, Florida. Don's always stepping up to take care of that end of the railroad. We have tried doing a little bit of on the scene dispatching, in the room, but on the Amherst weekend it's hard. Guys aren't really familiar with the layout, so for those weekend, Don's basically handled all the dispatching from the Southern Dispatch office.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, I enjoyed it because the nice thing for me is I get to, some of these guys that come over there, I know most of them. So it's always good to, to talk with them and, because I really don't see them that often. So it's always it's a good time for me too. So it's too bad we didn't do all 3 because old man Winter got in the way on Sunday, but it is what it is.
Yeah, that's a chance you take. I mean, the show, I think people on Saturday, the show was definitely loaded up on Saturday. I think a lot of people went to the show on Saturday because they knew what was coming in on Sunday. But it was a good weekend. I had a great time at the show. I stopped by to see Ray actually at his booth. His booth was very busy. It was a good time.
How often do you normally host operating sessions for outside the special events?
Well, locally for my crew, we operate once a month typically. But for the outside people, I typically do something associated with the RPM when they have it here in the Northeast, NERPM. I usually open up for that. I do open up for regional conventions. There hasn't been a national convention around here really since I had the layout, but I know Rochester's coming up. I'll open up for that. So, if people even hit me up, they're going to be in the area, they want to come operate, I'll try to throw something together. I'm pretty open to that, to try to give people somewhere to come and see the layout and get a chance to run some trains. I myself have taken advantage of that on trips I've taken where I go and get the NMRA directory out and look up some people and find people wherever I am and make some phone calls or some emails and hook up that way. And it's worked out really well for me. So I just try to pay it back, what I've been able to enjoy to try to give back to the other people.
Yeah, that's good. Now, awesome. Are you planning on doing anything for the NER convention coming up?
I am planning to have a operating session and one layout tour for that convention coming up in October. I'm involved a little bit with layout coordination on the committee. So I'm going to be a little bit busy with that. So I'm just going to do the one operating session here, and then one day of a tour. But it's a different end of it when you start to actually be the coordinator to find layouts and get people to open up. It's a different side of it that I haven't really seen as being a layout owner and operator. So it's interesting.
I just want to let you know I won't be able to remote operate that session for you.
Yeah, Don's already calling out for that one.
I'll be sitting in the chair in the same room.
There you go. That's there good. You go. We might have to find another dispatcher. Maybe somebody can fire that up. But so you mentioned Amherst. That's once a year, and you've been pretty consistent over the last few years of hosting that. And then you have the regional conventions that you talked about. When you have these types of events going on, how do these operating sessions really help enhance that event? And what does that do for the event?
Well, I think it just gives people, people typically arrive a day or two early, and they're always looking for somewhere to go and something to do. I know some other layouts have opened up. Neil Schofield's opened up his layout, and Chris Adams. There's been a few others, just to give the out-of-towners somewhere to come see a layout, see what they've accomplished in a year's time. So I think it's a good way for them to, have something to do while they're waiting for the show to start on Saturday. Typically guys from out of state, they go both days to the show. They've traveled this far, so they spend a Saturday and Sunday at the show. But, Friday night or Thursday, if they fly in early, they're looking for somewhere to go and take a look at something that's, different to them. And I think guys come here. It's been almost a consistent same cruise for the last couple of years because they just want to see what's changed here, and they've always had a good time and they like to return. So it's been fun for me too. I enjoy seeing them and renewing those relationships and friendships.
I know that you have your regular operators and your normal once a month operating sessions, and you've got to know those folks, myself included, and Don and the group. And I'm sure that gets a little more comfortable. But when you start to do these out of town operating sessions and you bring in a lot of modelers, including some well-known modelers and operators, is there any added pressure to this? I mean, do you feel the heat when you know that these folks are coming?
Yeah, I definitely, feel that a little more. Not to say that I don't try to do things for my regular crew, try to keep it interesting and make additions to the layout for them guys to see, make progress. But I think there's definitely more of a push when some, more of the well-known modelers and, railroaders across the country are coming to see the layout, or especially if I've been to their layouts and seen what they've accomplished. So there's definitely a pressure to get some stuff done, have something new, make sure there's something new to see. And also the operational layout, making sure everything is, peak performance, everything's clean, everything's ready to go, and I don't have any problems. And of course, problems always pop up. I could run this layout for a week straight without one issue, and as soon as somebody walks through the door, something happens. But try to do my best to avoid as much as I can that way, and just entertain them, in a way. And of course, the dessert cart comes out too, so they get entertained that way.
Well, maybe we should be asking Susan if there's any additional pressure from having out of town folks and making sure that the desserts live up to its stellar reputation.
Yeah, she definitely puts on a spread again. She enjoys people being here, and she enjoys the company and likes to see everybody. So it's a good time all the way around.
So what does a great op session look like on your railroad?
I guess a great op session on my railroad would be a day that, you ran pretty much error-free without problems, derailments or dead spots or whatever it is. Everything runs well. We run a lot of trains. That would be a good op session. A lot of through trains, a lot of mixed traffic, problem-free. And I guess just that everybody has a good time. I sit back a lot of times on op sessions and I listen to the social atmosphere, the conversation, and I just hear what guys are talking about, and people are, have their little conversations going on. They're laughing and, joking or whatever. Everybody's having a good time. So I think that's part of it. I mean, I think the camaraderie we have and that friendship and fellowship we have and the hobby is a big part of it for me. And just to hear that going on in the background is a good session to me too.
Well, that definitely seems like one of the positives of being able to do this What would you say is your biggest benefit by having this experience of hosting?
Well, I think the biggest benefit is for me personally, other than that friendship and renewing those friendships and getting to see people, I would say the biggest benefit for me is just kick me in the butt a little bit to get things done, to keep moving and try to have something new, before this session, this weekend I got some tunnel work done, some mock-ups of Flathead Tunnel, which has been sitting in the background. I've started to do a little bit more work over in Trentwood with the Kaiser aluminum plant and the backdrops. I finished some backdrops that I've been wanting to get done. It just motivates you to get stuff done because people are coming over, and it is a little different than the regular crew because they are, the regular crew sees it pretty frequently, and to them I think it's just sort of business as usual. They may see a few new things, but when you get an out-of-towner that only comes once a year and they come in and see something, they really check it out. They haven't seen it in a while, so it looks dramatically changed to them. So, that's what I shoot for.
Right. I mean, there's nothing like having guests come to a layout to motivate you to get stuff done. I mean, that's like the driving force with everybody that owns a layout. When you got people coming over and you got a deadline, you tend to get stuff done, and really you tend to get the most stuff done during that time frame.
Absolutely. And that's a big part of it, because a lot of times I think we got so many different distractions that go on, we're so busy with everything else. But when these guys are coming and you got that deadline and it just keeps getting closer and closer. And, I'm right in the middle of a big house renovation of a kitchen. And, I've been devoting all my time there, and I had an opportunity, Susan was great in saying, hey, take a break. You got to get this railroad together for these guys coming, in a week. So focus out there. So I spent the whole, week after work and different things working on the layout to get it prepped for this Amherst weekend.
Well, you definitely got to have the kitchen ready, because if she's going to be able to make those aforementioned snacks, the kitchen's got to be in one place, right?
Yeah, I had to have parts of it ready to roll. Yeah, certain parts were ready. Absolutely.
Well, she's planning and preparing for those. Talk about planning and preparing for the operating sessions and where this all starts kind of in the beginning, and the invitations and everything else. How does that advanced planning start?
So basically how it started for me was typically there's always somebody like that that's the leader of their group. And the leader of the groups are, different people. Matt Fricks was one of them. Chuck Stansel was the Texas crew. He was sort of the orchestrator of their group. And they basically, it started out with an email saying, hey, Mark, you're going to be able to open up for Amherst. We're thinking of coming up. And it's the back and forth of that. I've got this many guys, and, and that changes as it goes along. You get closer, and, a couple, 2-3 weeks away, they say, hey, I got a couple more guys that want to, pop by if that's all right, and that's sort of what happened one day. I had a pretty good sized group in here. It was actually more than I typically would have, but the guys are from out of town, and as long as they're aware and understand the space limitations that I have on this layout, and it's typically a 6-person operation. If they come in with 7 or 8, which I had, they may have to sit down for a while and observe and, watch and stuff instead of running trains. So that does happen, but I would rather have it that way than plain out refuse somebody and saying, no, I'm cutting it off hard at 6. As long as they're willing to deal with it, and it's fine with me. And so basically that's how it's worked. The emails back and forth, we get going, we set up the times, they give me an idea what time they're going to be in town, and we set it up. And then as far as prepping the layout, it's just getting all the local trains ready to roll, make sure all the car cards are in place, everything's built up to go. And, and then just getting them in here and getting everything rolling.
So when you're deciding on things like the number of sessions, or your crew sizes and the length of the session, and then venting experience levels of visitors, do you do any of that?
I definitely try to, I'm pretty hard with that 6 people, because you guys know my layout's tight. There's no question. I have choke points and everything. But like I said, if somebody says to me, hey, 2 guys just, let me know that they're going to be in the area too, would you mind if they came over? And as long as the whole crew knows that, we're going to have to work around each other, unless somebody may have to sit for a little bit, that works fine. so that's how I've sort of done it that way. As far as the vetting the experience levels, I think most of the people I know personally, somehow, I mean, there's been a few, new invites each time, but most of the guys that come, I've either operated on their layouts or I know their experience from even past years. Maybe the first year it was a little, shaky. I didn't really know what these guys were capable of. And I'm pretty open the same way I am with you guys. When you come to operate here, I basically ask guys, what do you feel like running? You want to run through train? You want a switching job? You want a hard switching job? You want an easy switching job? I really try to leave it up to them on what they want to do in that aspect of it. And then the number of sessions, like I said, I try to do something on Thursday. I take Thursday. I usually work part-time on Thursdays, but I take Thursday off and I'll be available from anytime from noon on Thursday, all day Friday, because I don't work on Friday. So I could have a morning, I could have an evening. And then, like I said before, Saturdays at the show, I don't really want to plan anything for Saturday. And Sunday's more of a going home thing. I know people at the show, and then Sunday night they may want to do something. I've even had people ask me about Monday, if I would be available on Monday. And Monday would work too if somebody was, stuck over. And matter of fact, this year with the storm, a lot of guys got trapped up in Springfield. And there were a few of them that said, hey, can we come down on Monday and operate? We'd like to come down and operate at your place on Monday, and I was in no position with my driveway and the snow I had here to get anybody in here on Monday. So
I would have been available.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know your vetting process isn't that good because I continue to be invited over to your layout, and yet I screw jobs up every time I'm there. So, I mean, I think it's pretty lax, but no, it must feel good. I mean, you obviously have these people with a passion to want to come see your layout. That's really got to be a great feeling.
Yeah, it is. It's nice that they want to come back. I guess if you go somewhere and you go one time and, you get in the car and you're driving away and say, yeah, I don't think I want to go see that again, and I've been there and I've done that. You know what I mean? Yep. Some of them, but by the same token, if I go somewhere and you can see the guys really trying, maybe it's not, up to your standard or it's, but you could see that it's on its way there. I'm also, understanding that way. We've all been there. I'm there, I've got 50% of my scenery done. And, you could come here and say, half of it's 50%, plywood Pacific and 50% scenic, But when people want to come back and they're fine with that, and I think they like the operating scheme and they like the way it operates and they like what I do. Yeah, it's a good feeling. I appreciate that they want to come back. And, I'm funny, I guess, as an owner, because I try to always thank everybody that comes, and everybody's like, you don't have to thank me. We're thanking you for letting us come. But it's the same way. I feel the same way that, hey, thanks for coming and operating this thing. This is what I built it for, and I just thank people for wanting to be here and come over and run trains on my layout. I built it for that, and I'm thankful that they want to be here.
I think it's more like you appreciate them coming by and operating on your layout. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? I do. The other thing that I'm going to throw out here that we never really talk about too much, which I think is important when we're talking about the vetting process, is especially if you have a signaled layout, you never think to ask the new operators, if they have a color blind problem, because that would be a big problem if they can't distinguish green from red. Yeah. And I think it's be important to know that, not that you won't let them operate. We're still going to obviously let them operate, but we can help them when it comes to that. A lot of people that are colorblind are good because they can tell if they know anything about railroad signals. It's like a traffic signal. They know where it is. Red's on the top, green's on the bottom, and they can almost just guess what it is, But it's just one of them things that I've asked some new operators, just to make sure, just saves from, plowing through a red light and then getting in trouble, but.
No, absolutely. And, and I do go over, I have a list of things I go over with people that, because, you guys know, the regulars know, I don't really have to review everything, but, I have a list of things I go over with the visitors, if there was an emergency, what they need to do, if, where the restrooms are, or where the restrooms, aren't.
I made that mistake one time. I told somebody out back, and Mark's like, "No, go in the house." Like, I felt bad because I told the person to go back behind the barn.
I got the same restroom.
Yeah, no, go behind the camper.
Yeah.
But
go behind the bushes and don't be standing in front of the ring camera. That's all.
Yeah, right. But we talk about food and drinks in the room because I usually bring soda up and stuff outside the room and stuff. We talk about stuff like that. I go over my train instruction cards, how they explain what each train does. Car cards. Some people don't know car cards. They're not even familiar with them, what they do. So I go through car cards and how the boxes work and what to look at. The radios. I go over radio etiquette, listen before you key in the mic and, key up and don't talk right away. There's these little things that people do, and they still do it even though you tell them, but I try to catch a lot of that. And the signals, I do go reference over the signals, and I tell them that, the layout's fully CTC signaled, and, basically red means stop and everything else means go, and, the throttles, if somebody... Typically, guys don't bring throttles, but if they showed up with NCE throttles, I go, make sure the addresses, we're not conflicting addresses. And I had a few guys running Wi-Fi, a couple of guys use cell phones this past time, which I've been able to do with that Wi-Fi Trax adapter I have. So, it works pretty good, and like I said, I enjoy it. I enjoy sitting here and seeing this thing I've made come to life and sort of run the way you've always envisioned it to run, and it's actually doing what you always thought it would do. It's definitely rewarding to see that.
Well, I got to say, after last weekend, that when I dispatched the 2 sessions we did, it was like flawless. I don't think I can't think of one problem that we had that needed some. I think we talked about a few little minor things at the end of the first op session, but it didn't reoccur at the next op session. So we kind of nipped that one in the butt. It was a small issue, but.
Well, let me roll into that. I mean, how do we get to a point where we're able to do that, Mark? The preparedness and everything. We talked about preparing the operators. Talk about preparing the layout and the things that you do. And is it your typical process from normal, or are you seemingly doing some more because it's out of towners and a little bit more pressure?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a little more pressure there to get everything squared away. A lot of times you guys come and what's what when you get here. If things aren't really where they're supposed to be or whatever, we can sort of almost pick up where we left off with you guys. So it's definitely a little more involved to get everything to that starting block when it's outside people that aren't familiar with the layout. The other part of it is in between. That's the one that's the real push. So I had we ran like 12 trains on Thursday. I think I had 8 or 9 operators here on Thursday. Thursday was a big crunch. That was a tough day. A lot of people, a lot of trains. So what I have to do in between is now I have to go back and restage the layout. And I don't know if you wanted me to get into that, but so restaging the layout is basically, I got to go through all the car cards, make sure everything's where it's supposed to be, flip cards. Because typically out of towners, they don't want to flip cards. Some of them don't even understand it. So I got to go through, flip all the cards to the next location, pull loads off, put loads on, make it look, because, I want to make it look realistic. And then just whatever trains didn't run, if I do have some locals or something, the through trains self-stage basically, but the locals, if they don't run and I don't run them, and if I just let them run the next session, it sort of throws off the yard. The yard gets backed up with that particular local's cars. There's more of those cars the next time when I build the layout, for the third session, let's say. So I almost have to physically run those trains that didn't run, those locals, just run them out. And a lot of times, I'll be honest with you guys, between Thursday and Friday, I didn't have a whole bunch of time. I did a lot of, 5-finger switching. I just picked up the cars from the train in the yard, moved them to where they had to go, picked the cars up that were coming back and brought them back to the yard and brought the car cards correspondingly. And then, of course, I run the track cleaning car around the whole layout again. I run everything. And I was talking to Don about this after these sessions. It amazes me how dirty the track gets between one session and the next. I just cannot believe it. I mean, that black gook or, whatever it is, that gunk that's on the track. It's just amazing because I ran the cleaning trains. It was spotless. I could run my fingers anywhere. On Thursday on this layout, there was nothing. And then Friday morning, I'm out here and I'm running my fingers around and I just started picking up that black streak everywhere, So I ran the cleaning train. I, hand cleaned a lot of the major switching areas and stuff and basically got everything ready to go, restaged the through trains. So I did say the through trains sort of restage themselves, but what happens with me is they dead end, the head end power goes into the staging yard and I got to bring the head end, back out. So I have to pick up the power and bring it back to the other end of the train and get it in position to run a through train in the other direction. So there's a little bit of work in between the sessions. And when you got back to backs, fortunately, I had some help this year. Joe was able to come out and Joe Zapiga, and he actually had Thursday afternoon off and he spent the afternoon and early evening with me. And then he came back first thing in the morning on Friday and helped me finish restaging for the Friday ops. And then on Sunday, Corey was going to try to stop over and give me a hand, but we all know what happened with Sunday's session. So,
well, you talk about the 050 stuff. You're not the only one.
Yeah,
I've done it myself. When we had an op session last night here, and I came in here this afternoon, and I didn't have time to be running stuff back and forth. I was running cuts of cards between the odds of my fingers just to get them moving and get them done. Because I got paperwork to do. I got all this stuff set up because I can't sleep at night until the layout's ready to go. You know what I mean? It's just the way I am. It's some OCD thing in my head that I have to have this. I will not do anything on this layout, regardless of how bad it needs to be done, until this railroad is ready to operate again. I don't know what it is. I've been like that my whole time I've been operating. It's just something that's in me.
What's interesting to me is that you talked about all this after hours stuff with restaging the layout, but I know at least one guy, and that was Dave Apenasano, who unfortunately couldn't make it because of the weather, and he was caught back in Texas, but he was really interested in seeing that. He was like, I'm almost excited to see a layout restaged than I am that. So, I mean, there's even opportunities for those out-of-towners to learn a bit more even before and after a operating session, not only just during.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Frisch was very, on Friday, because we were going to restage for Sunday. At that point in time, I didn't know what the weather was going to do. We all heard the forecast, but we had our fingers crossed that Sunday would happen. So Matt had his guys, and he had talked to me, on email, and we talked on the phone about, he would stay with his guys, and he physically wanted to see the layout have to be restaged, what it involves. So they helped a little bit on Friday, get things back to where they had to go. And, just get an idea of what, restaging, a layout of this size. I mean, it's not massive, but there's quite a bit to be done. And so, like you said, I know Dave was interested. If Dave was able to make it, he was interested in checking that out and how that worked. I guess, you go to somebody's layout and everything's ready there, sitting there waiting for you, but it is a process for everybody to get it to look like that when you walk through the door, you know what I mean? And, where you leave it. Unfortunately, some guys have it where they can just sort of stop mid-session and, the next session, they just pick up where they left off and it doesn't really affect anything. Everything just runs, perfectly normal. I unfortunately can't do that. I wish in a way I could, but I just can't do it that way. Everything gets all out of sync. It doesn't work.
Well, you have a lot to do, and you normally don't run 12 or 15 trains in an op session. You know what I mean? So Thursday was your big Friday. Was it Friday? Friday was the big day. No, Thursday was the big day.
Thursday, yeah.
We moved a lot of stuff. We didn't move. What did we move? Like half the trains on a Friday.
Yeah,
because you had a lot less operators.
Yeah,
but. What must be perfect versus good enough on your layout?
To me, perfect is operations, as far as things working well, derailments, electrical dead spots, shorts, those type of things. Those are the things that I strive for perfection. The track work, I strive for perfection. Good enough to me is a guy that's running a train and, maybe he's not in the siding the way I would typically run it. He's maybe out in the main a little bit more. And, if it makes it harder for the dispatcher, I don't care. I'm not dispatching, so.
What a guy.
But, I'm just saying, I think, that's because that's on me. You know what I mean? If it's doesn't run well, that's really on me, and if I go somewhere and somebody's got a layout and they got a problem somewhere, a turnout or something that's dead or certain dead spot somewhere, and you go and you make mention of it, and then you go back a month later or 2 months later and you're running trains and, you get to that same spot and you got a dead spot, or you got a turnout that don't work, I mean, that's frustrating for me and I don't like it. And, I don't, like to deal with that. So I don't want people to deal with that here, so I try to be pretty proactive to that. So if you were here on Thursday and there was something not right, when you left on Thursday night, I was out here, fixing some stuff. There was very really minor problems at this whole weekend. I got to say that, but I definitely jumped right on anything that was a problem. And I typically do that even between, after sessions with you guys. I try to get right on those things. I don't let those linger if I can help it. And some do slip through the cracks, there's no question, but I try to avoid that.
You were talking about new operators and watching them and seeing the way they operate. Where does the balance come in between teaching and then you let them go and you just kind of let them make their own mistakes, and where to step in? How do you make that judgment?
Well, I guess for me is I give people the instruction cards, and the instruction cards are just pretty brief. They just tell you where you're starting, where you're going. I try not to get too deep into it and micromanage them on how they physically switch out the trains. But then by the same token, if something they're doing is affecting the rest of the operation, for example, if you were up in Columbia Falls and you were switching Columbia Falls and you were constantly, occupying the secondary main and the main, I would have to say something. I would have to go up there and say, hey, you can't be doing that. You can't because you're following the whole railroad, that's not how it works. And I give people some general ideas, and I'll ask guys. Some guys will ask me right out. They'll say, how would you do this? Or what would you do here? And I'm fine if you ask, but I'm not going to go, like I said, micromanaging or saying, hey, I typically would switch this car first and that car second. And I go down and grab those cars third. And, I want to let people have that freedom because I enjoy that freedom when I go somewhere. But like I said, by the same token, I think you have to really be careful as far as letting it really get out of hand. And I try not to let it get out of hand.
Yeah, we had a little instance on the Thursday night session where that was going on.
Yeah.
And I had to have Joe go over there and talk to the operator and nip that in the butt a little bit. So you've been doing operating sessions for a long time. What are some of the few things that you've learned over the years?
Over the years, I think I've learned that you get varying abilities. You get people in here that think they're able to operate more than they're able to operate. Some people will say, oh, I'm really good at switching. What's your hardest job? And you put them there and it's like they get a third of it done, And that's what, like you guys said before, vetting. It's hard to vet people you don't operate with. It's really hard to find out what they're really capable of doing. So, that's one of the things I think I've learned over the years is, trying to be careful on, if somebody says to me, hey, I want the hardest switching job in your layout, just being sure that they can, they physically know what they're getting into. I guess the other thing is the biggest thing I think I've learned with operating sessions is you got to try to have fun. I mean, I know it's stressful. There's no question. I'll say for myself, I am definitely stressed on Thursday. I'm stressed on Friday, stressed Saturday night, getting ready for Sunday. My stress level is up. My wife sees it, people see it. But by the same token, when you get done on Thursday night, and everything went well, you're really happy. So, I think the biggest thing I've learned is not to maybe stress out as much as I did maybe the first couple of years. I'm definitely lower keyed than I was. So, just letting it, happen. It's got to just come together. And I think that, if you put too much into it, if you really try to make it run like a Swiss watch, it's probably never going to meet your expectations. If you expect that, you're going to have problems. So I think learning to just realize that everything is not going to go perfectly. Typically, you are going to have minor things happen, and being able to accept that, and maybe make the corrections and just move on and learn from it if you can. And if you can keep it from happening again, great. If not, you just got to roll with it. And, in the end, it's all about having a good time. That's what it comes down to. Having a good time, running trains, having a good conversation, enjoying each other. I mean, that's what I get out of it. And that's what I hope everybody that comes here gets out of it.
Well, I mean, it's a natural fact that the gremlins will roll when you have visitors on your layout. It happens to all of us. It happened to me last night over here. So it's like, it is what it is. And when I first started doing operating sessions, I used to be nervous all the time. Oh, the guy, well, this thing, he's not running, and I used to like run around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to figure out why this is happening. But over the years, you tend to get away from that because it's like you can't control what you can't control, basically, especially with electronics. Stuff is going to happen. And it's funny because we go to all these different op sessions now that we travel all over the place to go to, and we see this happening to these people. And it's like, I want to just say, look, don't worry about it. Just chill out. Everything's good. We'll get by it, blah, blah, blah. But it happens to all of us. And there's really nothing we can do about it.
That's, I think, the biggest thing I've learned, if I could say, over the years, is just to be, take it in stride. It's a hobby. It's, something to enjoy and have fun with. And it's not a job, nobody's, dying because they, derailed or whatever, or like New England Central, like 10 cars and off the rails today. And, it's not that, it's just fun, and I really try to, my wife, Susan will be like, isn't this supposed to be fun? Aren't you guys supposed to be out there having a good time and laughing and joking and having fun? And she's right, and she puts me back in perspective a lot of times. I say, yeah, you're right. And, and she's always offering to come out and help me restage if I need help or whatever. And, but I think that's the biggest part of it is just, just taking it as it comes and not getting all worked up. And hey, we've all been there. And every guy that comes here.
Absolutely.
Every guy that comes here has a layout, and they know too.
Well,
And perspective is a great word there. And I'm going to ask both of you because both of you have been in this same situation of being able to host these type of event operating sessions. But I'll start with our guest. Mark, when you go to operating sessions now that are event related, how does that change your perspective and how's that change the way you see them?
I think when I go places now, I'm definitely more just open to what they're dealing with because I know what they're up against. I know what they're dealing with. I definitely go there with some expectations to be able to, run a train pretty trouble free and, do whatever I'm doing if I'm switching, which is what I typically like to do, having a little bit of a challenge and having a good time, realistic operations, that's what I sort of look for. And I hope that I get when I go somewhere. But by the same token, I don't want to see the owner of that layout, sweating it out either. I want to be, understanding if they have a few problems. It's like, my first comment to anybody that we start to have problems. I got a layout. I know where you're at. I've been there and don't sweat it. It's not a big deal, So I think I try to just notch it down a bit. Sometimes I think some people go in there really uptight and they want everything to be perfect. And I think those guys probably don't own layouts,
And I mean, I feel the same way. We go there. We've gone to a lot of layouts. We've operated a lot of different places, but those times are really far and few between. We've had some layouts where things didn't go so good, but it is what it is. I mean, and like I said, as a layout owner, we understand that. You don't have to start sweating and making excuses up why things ain't working. I mean, you're talking, you're preaching to the choir at that point. We know exactly what you're going through. So it is what it is. Like this car, this car keeps derailing. You know what I say? If you get a car card, put the car card on the bench and I'll worry about it tomorrow because I ain't going to sit here and whip out tools to try to fix a car. It ain't worth it. You know what I mean? I got plenty of cars here get another one.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. For sure. So we got a lot of folks listening here, and some may start to think about doing this themselves to open up their layout for events, to be able to host these operating sessions for out-of-towners. What is your recommendation, Mark, for those folks? And when is a good time within their layout life and as they're building their layout or creating their layout? When is a good time to start to open up and expand to this?
Well, I think when they feel that they've gone through that process of vetting the layout, getting it operating decently, they have a good operating plan. You always want to have your local guys, in my opinion, take care of that for you, really put it through its paces prior to opening up to the public, if you want to call it that. I think by doing that, you just create a lot less stress on yourself. You take care of those problems up front. But then, just being open, somebody calls you, somebody emails you, you meet somebody at a show, and you say, hey, you want to come over and see the layout? We're on a train, may start out small. You may get a couple guys, and then it just builds on itself. But, I would just say to anybody that has a layout that they feel that it operates well and they got a good scheme, an operating scheme, don't be afraid to get the word out and say, hey, you're in the area, come on by. If you're a member of the NMRA, get involved in that. You can put your information up on the NMRA site. If you're involved in OPSIG, there's places to put your layouts on OPSIG. So you're, a little more publicly, not publicly, but an OPSIG members can see your layout and see where you're at, and just give you, the opportunity to open up. And I would say do it. I mean, there's nothing more enjoyable than having people coming to your layout and, that just want to come see it, and you learn from them too. Somebody will come in and, I had Kevin Tully. He was here. He gave me some great ideas. I have what was a cores mill in the middle of the layout, and I've never really liked that industry. And Kevin was looking at it and he says, well, what are you thinking there? And I said, well, it's just never really, it was just sort of a fill in, and I don't know. I never really cared for it. And he says, well, what about making a feed mill? A feed mill, you're going to get, 3 or 4 different types of cars at a feed mill. And so I got Kevin, I've been working with Kevin in the past, week or so, trying to figure out a feed mill for that location. So, I mean, there's payback. It works both ways. You learn something from your guests too. So if you're in that boat and you got a layout, don't be afraid. Jump in.
Yeah, well, what I'm going to do for the people listening is that they can revert back to an episode we did a while back in Bulletproof Operations. That'd be a good place to go. We have a lot of good tips for hosts that want to host op sessions. Making sure your track is good. And like Mark said, the best way is bring in your friends that, your normal weekly operators and just run that thing as right through all the paces, get all the bugs out of it. And you're never going to get all the bugs out of it. I mean, it's just stuff happens. There's no getting around it. I don't care who you are, how good your railroad is. You're always going to have a gremlin come up every now and then. But, before you have visitors traveling from out of state to come to your layout, just make sure that if your operators are happy, they'll be happy. That's how I look at it.
Sounds like the 5 P's of success: proper planning prevents poor performance, and doing all those things that Mark had mentioned. And of course, Don mentioning as well of, getting all that preparedness and then, thinking it out, making a plan. Definitely things that Mark and you have both done to have very successful operating sessions, not only for your normal crews, but for the folks out of town as well. The positivity that has come from having these out of town folks. Do you have a top memorable moment of those operating sessions?
I think I do. I would say, the top memorable moment is just when certain people, and I don't need to name names, but certain people with really nice layouts, places I've been, they've come here and seen my layout, and I've been invited back, when I'm in their area, that invitation saying, hey, when you're back in Texas, when you're back out in Wisconsin, when you're in Denver, and, just hearing that from people and saying, you are welcome here anytime, just that, welcoming attitude, because, I guess, it's shared, I welcome them here and they're going to welcome me there. I think that's there's really no one event, but that's what I think the most important thing for me has been, is just that camaraderie and that mutual, being able to open up each other's layouts to each other. That's really been neat.
Yeah. I mean, this year, finally, I was able to host an operating session for the Cocoa Beach RPM. I'm hoping with this year, we did one, but next year we're going to do a little more advanced planning. And so, because John Farrington, he wants to operate on his layout too. So we're hoping that I just want to kind of push more into operations into this RPM they have here, because I know there's a lot of guys that go there that like to operate. And I had a few guys here a few weeks ago, and they had a great time, So, and I've also had people just coming to Florida call me up and say, "Hey, look, I'm going to be in Orlando, or I'm going to be here, and I like to come by and see the layout." Well, most of the guys, they come by to see the layout, but most of the time I'll put a throttle in their hand and we'll run some trains around for them. You know what I mean? So at least they can operate. But it all starts with getting it out there.
Absolutely.
Really helps make you feel like you've really taken advantage of your time in an area, right? When you can do more than just the event, when you can go see other people, see what they've created. Yep. And, we're a big proponent of layout visits anyway. I think there's so much to learn. There's always a takeaway from a layout visit, whether it be, positive information or even maybe constructive stuff that maybe you don't want to do, and you get to see it in person and be able to get the feel of it. So always good to be able to do that. And it's always great when people open their homes and share their layouts with others. And boy, the benefits just seem to go both ways, right? It's a benefit for the layout owner. It's a benefit for the folks that are visiting. So very, very cool to be able to have those experiences.
Absolutely.
Yep. I agree.
Well, Mark, I want to thank you so much for coming by and sharing your experience with opening your layout to out-of-towners and all the preparedness that goes into making a successful operating session. If you're listening to this podcast and you found something that you found useful for it, please do us a favor and share it. You can check out all the additional information on this episode at aroundthelayout.com/214. Mark, thank you again for coming by and sharing your story.
Hey, Mark, thanks for coming by.
Hey, you're welcome. I'm glad to be here, guys. I enjoyed it. And hopefully I've inspired somebody to open their layout, and hearing Don with this, his operating, time on the show here and stuff. I think it's definitely something to get people to say, hey, let's try it. Let's open up.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout. You can check out all of the additional information. Oh, I don't like that. You can check out more on this podcast on our website, aroundthelayout.com/ holy cripe. I don't even have the numbers right in front of me. What the hell's wrong with me? We got to fire the blooper reel up here.
Oh, God. Big edit job going there.